My aunt mocked my motorcycle shop dreams, then begged me to fix her generator in a blackout. I sent the meme back with my rates, and let the cold answer her. I didn't expect it to hurt as much as it did. I mean, I knew my family didn't exactly understand my decision to leave university and pursue a career as a motorcycle mechanic, but this felt like a punch to the gut. I had just settled onto my couch after a long shift at Marvin's shop, the tools still clinging to my hands, grease embedded under my nails. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the family group chat, and I opened it without thinking. Aunt Karen had posted a meme. It was a cartoon of a greasy biker, tears dripping from his face, wiping them away with a wrench. The caption, "When dreams die, open a garage." I could feel my stomach drop as I read it again. My name was tagged right beneath it. And right on cue, my cousin, Mike, followed up with a joke. "Sounds like you, Dan. Just don't forget us when you're famous." I swallowed hard, trying to push back the sting that threatened to flood my chest. But it didn't stop there. My mom chimed in with a laugh emoji. It wasn't just a simple laugh. It was a comment designed to lessen any discomfort they felt about the post. As if saying it was all in good fun could wipe away the weight of the ridicule. I set the phone down, the room suddenly feeling smaller, colder. I stared at the screen for a few moments, trying to decide if I should say something, defend myself like I'd done a million times before. But I knew better now. I'd been here too many times. Every word I'd said in defense of my decision had fallen on deaf ears. I quietly exited the chat. No explanation, no fight. It wasn't the first time they'd mocked me for choosing this path, but this time, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to defend myself again. Not this time. The truth was, I was tired. Tired of explaining, tired of justifying my decisions. This was more than a meme or a joke. It was the culmination of years of mockery, of subtle comments that hinted at my failure. I didn't need to prove anything to them anymore. I tossed the phone onto the coffee table and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I could hear the laughter from the chat echoing in my head. It wasn't the first time I'd felt like I didn't belong in this family, but it might be the last. I had made my peace with what I was doing. I didn't need their approval. I just needed to keep building. I pulled the thick mechanic's gloves off my hands and set them next to me. This was my life now. And if they couldn't see the value in it, then maybe it was time to stop waiting for them to notice. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I was just a kid when I first started taking things apart. It wasn't about breaking things. It was about understanding how they worked. I'd sneak into the garage, trying to figure out what made the old bike engine hum, what made the lights flicker on the dashboard of Dad's old truck. I didn't always put them back together perfectly, but I learned a lot about how things fit, how everything had a purpose, even the smallest screw or bolt. But my family never saw it that way. To them, I was just the kid who got his hands dirty, who couldn't focus on his books, who had no direction. My father, especially, hated that I didn't follow in his footsteps. He worked in construction, spent his days managing projects, wearing that hard hat like it gave him the right to look down on anyone who didn't play the real game of business. Real careers, he'd say, taking a long drag from his cigarette as he watched me tinker with the bike in the backyard. They don't involve grease under your nails, Danny. They involve numbers and suits, not wrenches and engines. I remember those words, even now. They echoed in my head when I dropped out of business school. 2 semesters. That's all it took for me to realize that the path they had carved out for me wasn't my path. I was suffocating in it, and every class I attended made it harder to breathe. So, I made a choice. I told them I was leaving. I told them I was going to trade school, to learn how to work on motorcycles. That's when the joke started. My Aunt Karen, of course, had her thing to say. "Well, someone has to change the oil," she'd quip with a smirk. Like I'd failed at life, like fixing engines for a living was a joke. I stood there, my back stiff with frustration, trying to explain to them that I wasn't throwing my life away. But the words never seemed to land. They didn't see what I saw in the machines, the way everything clicked together, how fixing an engine gave me a sense of purpose, of control, of mastery over something no one else could understand. The truth was, no one in my family ever understood. They didn't get why I wanted to get my hands dirty, why I cared about something as simple as fixing a broken bike. They never saw the value in it. Lila did, though. My cousin Lila. She always had this way of making me feel like I was worth something, even if the rest of the family didn't. She was the golden child, the one everyone praised. Look at her, always getting straight A's, My mom would say with that pride in her voice, the voice that was never for me. She's going places. I'd watch Lila get all the attention, the praise, while I stood in the background, a mechanic's son who just couldn't seem to get it right in their eyes. I dropped out of business school, and all they saw was failure. And when I told them what I was really going to do with my life, it felt like I was asking them to accept that failure. I didn't care about their approval anymore, but it still hurt. Even when they couldn't understand why I chose motorcycles over spreadsheets, over degrees, over whatever they thought was the right way. In that moment, as I stood in front of them, I realized something that took me too long to accept. I wasn't going to change their minds. They'd never get it. And for the first time, I didn't want them to. I didn't need to explain myself. I'd made my choice. And I'd show them, in time, that there was more to this life than what they thought was the right path. And even if they never saw it, even if they mocked me forever, I was going to build something that mattered to me. I'm getting used to the grease. It's funny how quickly a person can adapt when they're determined. I had thought, at first, that I'd never get the hang of it. The carburetors, the timing chains, the wiring diagrams that looked like foreign languages. But now, it felt like second nature. The tools, the engine sounds, the rhythm of it all. It made sense in ways that the corporate world never did. Marvin's shop was gritty, covered in the scent of oil and metal, a far cry from the pristine, polished office buildings I was supposed to be working in, according to my parents' plan. But here, in the cluttered workshop with Marvin hollering at me to hurry up and get the carburetor tuned, I felt like I was finally doing something that mattered. I'd been working under Marvin for a few months now. He was rough around the edges, but there was no denying his expertise. He knew motorcycles like the back of his hand, and he wasn't shy about teaching me the hard way. Stop wasting time looking at it. He'd bark when I hesitated on a task. You already know what's wrong, so fix it. Get your hands dirty, or you'll never learn. At first, I hated his tone. He was blunt. He didn't give compliments. But the more I worked alongside him, the more I realized he wasn't here to coddle me. He wanted to see me do the work, to prove that I could make it in this world without relying on some cushy office job or a degree I didn't want. He wanted me to earn it, to really understand the engines and mechanics, not just be some guy who got by on book smarts. And so I worked. I worked hard. I watched the bikes transform under my hands, turning over from dead weight to roaring machines. It felt satisfying, in a way that no report or spreadsheet ever had. But there were days when the ache in my chest wouldn't go away. I'd scroll through my phone, idly checking social media, and I'd see the pictures of my family at birthday parties, holidays, and milestones that I wasn't a part of. The occasional message popped up, usually from my mom, with a photo of Lila's latest achievement or some family gathering that had gone unnoticed by me. It was strange how quickly they had moved on. I didn't expect them to fully embrace my decision, but sometimes a text that said, "How's it going?" felt like too much to ask for. And yet, I kept at it. I had to. This was my life now. No more wishing things were different. No more waiting for someone else's approval. Marvin's shop became my sanctuary. The sound of a perfectly tuned engine was my new comfort, and I had no idea how much I'd been missing that sense of accomplishment. The shop wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. And there was something beautiful in that. Every bike I worked on, every problem I solved, built me up in a way nothing else ever had. Sure, my family didn't understand it, but it didn't matter anymore. It was funny how things worked out. As my skills grew, so did my confidence. And even if no one in my family ever acknowledged it, I was finally getting the validation I needed from myself. I wasn't just fixing bikes. I was building my future, one repair at a time. It was a brutal winter. The kind where the air cuts through you like glass and the ground is covered in a thick layer of frost that doesn't melt for weeks. In the shop, the bikes were mostly dormant, tucked away under tarps and blankets, waiting for the warmth of spring to bring them back to life. But the cold weather didn't stop the work from coming. People still needed their ATVs for the trails, their snowmobiles to get out and enjoy the season. The phone started ringing, and soon, Marvin was pointing to various tasks for me to handle. Checking electrical systems, running diagnostics, tuning up engines that had sat idle too long. It was good for business. But then the calls started to change. It wasn't just the usual customers looking for a quick fix. No, this was different. Aunt Karen's voicemail was the first. Her voice, tight with urgency, was filled with panic. "Daniel, honey, My backup generator died during the storm, and the pipes are starting to freeze. I know you've got the skills to fix it. Can you please come over? I don't know what to do." I couldn't help but chuckle bitterly. The irony of it hit me like a slap. She had mocked me, laughed at my decision to leave business school, told me I'd never amount to much. And now, in the middle of a cold snap, she was calling me for help, for something as simple as a backup generator. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I let the voicemail sit there, staring at me from my phone. A few hours passed, and another message came through. This time, it was my mom. "Daniel, honey, Karen really needs your help. Her pipes are going to freeze, and I know it's a big ask, but maybe you could just go over and take a look? You're so good with this stuff." There it was, the expectation. The same one I'd been carrying around my entire life. The assumption that I would drop everything for them. The idea that because I knew how to fix things, I was somehow obligated to do it without question. I scrolled through the pictures in my gallery. I found the meme Aunt Karen had shared months ago, the one with the biker, wiping his tears with a wrench, laughing about dreams dying, and opening a garage. Without thinking, I took a screenshot of the meme. It felt like the perfect response, the perfect end to this long, twisted chapter. I didn't even type a message. I simply sent the screenshot back to the family group chat. "Still think I'm a joke?" was all I wrote. I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the send button. It wasn't just about fixing the generator anymore. It was about something deeper, about the years of ridicule, the laughter, the dismissiveness that had been thrown at me without thought or care. I hit send. The notification popped up almost instantly. The silence that followed felt suffocating. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom a few minutes later. "Daniel, please don't be like this. Your aunt is in trouble. You're being petty." But the sting didn't hurt anymore. The words were just words, empty and meaningless. I wasn't going to be their free labor anymore. I wasn't going to be the one who dropped everything just because they needed something fixed. I wasn't their joke anymore. For the first time, I felt the weight of the past few years lift off my shoulders. It was hard, but it was also liberating. I wasn't asking for their approval anymore. I was building my own life, my own future, and if they didn't get it, that was their problem. As the evening drew in, I put my phone down and turned my attention back to the bike I was working on. The engine hummed beneath my hands, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The snow kept falling, thick and heavy, as if the world was wrapped in a blanket of silence. Outside, the roads were icy, cars were slowed to a crawl, and the usual sounds of the city felt muffled. Inside the shop, the heat was cranked up, but it didn't stop the cold air from creeping in through the cracks around the windows. I didn't mind it. The shop felt like a cocoon, a space where I could focus on the work and shut out everything else. Then the call came. It was Aunt Karen, again. Her voice was even more frantic this time, each word sharp with desperation. "Daniel, please, I'm begging you. My generator's completely shot, and the pipes are freezing. The kids are at home, and I don't know who else to call. Can you please come fix it? I'll pay you, I swear." I paused, leaning against the workbench, the wrench still in my hand. Part of me wanted to just hang up. Let her deal with the mess she'd made, the mess she'd ignored for so long. But then another part of me, the part that still thought families should help each other out, softened, just a little. I hadn't responded to her first call. I'd sent the meme as a statement, but the truth was, I wasn't heartless. The thought of her kids in the cold, of water pipes freezing and bursting, hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I'd been pissed at the disrespect, at the years of mockery. But it didn't change the fact that I knew how to fix it. A deep breath, and I made my decision. I responded with a simple message. "I'll come by, but you pay me standard rates. Emergency surcharge applies." There it was. I wasn't doing it for free. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about respect. A few minutes later, the reply came. Of course. I'll pay. I just need it fixed." I grabbed my jacket, pulled on my boots, and headed out to my truck. As I drove through the snow, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything I had left unsaid. The meme was one thing, but the way I had been treated all these years, silent jabs, dismissive comments, being the family ATM whenever they needed me, had all piled up. And now, here I was, on my way to fix the very thing that they had taken for granted, the thing that had made me feel like a joke. When I pulled up to Karen's house, The driveway was lined with snow, the garage door slightly ajar, and the house seemed darker than usual. I could see Karen pacing by the window, her phone pressed to her ear. I knocked twice hard. The door swung open almost immediately, and Karen stood there, wringing her hands. She looked frazzled, her hair in a messy bun, her eyes wide with panic. "Thank God you're here," she said, her voice more pleading than I was used to. "It's so cold, and the kids are freezing. I don't know what to do anymore." I nodded and stepped inside, brushing the snow from my boots. As I followed her into the living room, I could hear the hum of the broken generator outside. It wasn't hard to find. It was right where I thought it would be, an old model that had seen better days. I pulled my gloves on and got to work, feeling the familiar rhythm take over. Each tool, each turn of the wrench, made me feel a little more in control. The hours drifted by as I fixed the generator, replaced a few faulty parts, and finally got it running again. When it hummed to life, I could hear Karen sigh with relief from the other room. I walked back inside, wiping my hands on a rag, my back sore from bending over the machine. "It's done. Your pipes should be fine now, but make sure you check them every few hours just to be safe." She nodded, her shoulders slumping as the tension drained out of her. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now. "You don't know how much this means to me." I shrugged, but it wasn't out of humility. I was just trying to keep the walls up. It's part of the job. She hesitated, looking down at the floor before meeting my eyes. "Daniel, I want to apologize. For everything. I shouldn't have laughed at you. Shouldn't have made you feel like you didn't matter. I was wrong." For a second, I didn't know how to react. The apology didn't feel like it came from a place of deep remorse. It felt more like a gesture, something she felt she needed to say because I had helped her, because I hadn't turned her away. But still, it was the first time I had heard those words from her. And maybe that's all I needed. I didn't want to forgive her immediately. I wasn't sure I could, after everything. But in that moment, I didn't want to drag it out. "I appreciate it," I said finally, grabbing my tools. "But I don't need your apology. I need you to understand something. Just because I'm your family doesn't mean I owe you anything." She flinched, but I didn't soften the words. I stood there, the silence stretching between us, before I added, "You can keep the change, though. But from now on, if you need me, you pay me like anyone else." She nodded, her eyes downcast. It wasn't the heartfelt apology I had hoped for, but maybe it was enough for now. As I left, Karen's house was warmer, quieter, the hum of the generator filling the space that had once been a quiet, cold void. I turned the key in my truck's ignition and drove off into the snow, feeling the weight of the past few months settle into my chest, but also feeling something else, something unfamiliar. Freedom. I had no idea how Karen's house was even standing. The broken generator had been just the tip of the iceberg. When she'd called me for help, I hadn't expected much more than a quick fix, maybe a little awkwardness, and then I'd go home and get back to my life. But when I walked through the door and saw what had been ignored for years, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anger. I'd seen neglect before in other places, in other lives, but this was different. It was personal. The house was in disarray. I mean, it wasn't exactly falling apart, but there was a deep sense of apathy in the air, a feeling like no one had really cared for this place in years. The lights flickered. The kitchen sink had a slow leak that had turned into a pool of water underneath the cabinets. The carpet was worn, stained, the edges curling up in places. The furniture was mismatched, like no one had bothered to buy anything that really fit. There was no warmth in the house, no sign that this was the place someone could call home. But the worst part? The part that really hit me in the gut? The unfinished projects. I'd seen these before, half-built shelves in the hallway, piles of old tools, a half-painted fence in the backyard, a rusted swing set that hadn't been used in years. All signs that things had been started but never finished, ignored because no one cared enough to follow through. I walked around, looking at the damage, the neglect, and I realized something I hadn't before. This was all part of a pattern. Karen wasn't just ignoring the house. She'd been ignoring everything for years, including me. "Hey," I called out, walking back into the living room where Karen had been sitting, nervously fiddling with a napkin. "I'm done with the generator. You'll be okay now, but there's a lot of work to be done here. The plumbing, the wiring, the appliances. You need to fix this place up before it's too late." Her eyes flickered with the same helplessness I had seen earlier. I I know, she murmured. It's just so much. I can't do it all at once. The words stung more than they should have, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I just nodded, trying to keep my frustration in check. She didn't need another lecture right now. She needed help. You've got a lot of things here that need fixing, Karen. But this house, it's not just about fixing pipes and wiring. You've been ignoring it for so long that it's almost beyond saving. If you want to change this, if you want to keep this place standing, you've got to start caring about it. You've got to care about the things that matter. She looked at me, eyes wide and a little shocked, like she hadn't expected that response. She didn't say anything at first, just stared, like she was trying to find the right words. But all that came out was a small, weary sigh. I'm sorry, Daniel, she said finally. I know I've been difficult. I just didn't think. I didn't think you'd ever come back to help. I took a breath, my anger starting to recede, replaced by something else, maybe pity, maybe sympathy, but I wasn't sure yet. I was still too angry to fully process it. Don't apologize to me, Karen, I said, voice steady. Just fix it. Stop running away from everything that needs attention. You can't expect someone else to do it for you forever. I grabbed my tools, slipping them back into my bag, but before I turned to leave, I took one last look around the house. I wasn't just seeing the disrepair. I was seeing the patterns of neglect. It wasn't just the house that needed fixing, it was everything else, too. I wasn't sure Karen had heard me, but at least she had gotten the message. It wasn't about the generator anymore. It was about everything. And for the first time, I realized something. I wasn't the one who was broken. They were. As I walked out the door, I could feel the weight of the years lifting off me, slowly, almost imperceptibly. But it wasn't just about getting away from their problems. It was about learning to let go, to stop fixing everything for people who didn't even understand what they were breaking. And as the cold wind hit my face when I stepped into the driveway, I finally understood. I wasn't going to be the one to save them anymore. That was their job. Weeks passed after the incident with Karen, and life slowly started moving forward again. The bike shop was bustling with business, and I was finally starting to feel like I had a solid grip on my future. It wasn't glamorous, but I was good at it. And that, for the first time in a long while, felt like enough. I stayed busy, focusing on the bikes that came and went, the engines I brought back to life. I didn't hear much from my family after that night with Karen. No more awkward texts, no more messages that felt like they were just asking for favors. It was like they'd finally gotten the point, and that was a relief. But then, something strange started happening. I had posted a picture of myself working on a bike one afternoon. Nothing special, just a casual shot of me under the hood of a motorcycle. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone, just me sharing my work with the small community of mechanics and motorcycle enthusiasts that followed me online. I had just received a certification for an advanced diagnostic course, and I was proud of it. That's when it started. The first comment came from a client who had just picked up his bike. Great job on my bike, Dan. Runs like new again. Highly recommend. I smiled, glad to see some praise from someone outside of my circle. But then, another comment appeared. This one was from a cousin I barely knew, someone who hadn't spoken to me in years. Isn't this Karen's nephew? Awkward. The comment was followed by a string of laughing emojis, and then some family members started chiming in. There was my mom's cousin, Greg. I thought he was doing something more respectable with his life. Never saw this coming. Then Lila commented. Lila, my cousin, the one who always got the accolades, the praise, the acknowledgement. She was studying law, doing everything right, according to my parents. She wrote, I always knew you had a gift, Danny. Just, never expected this. But good for you, I guess. It stung, but I held it together. These were just comments, after all, just words on a screen. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was their way of saying, see, we were right. They couldn't help but frame it as something else. Something less than. I scrolled through the comments, each one more loaded than the last, and felt that same old ache. Those years of feeling overlooked, mocked, dismissed. But I wasn't that kid anymore, and I wasn't going to let them drag me back into that cycle of seeking their approval. I took a deep breath and moved on. A few days later, I got an unexpected message from Aunt Karen. Daniel, can we talk? It read. I've been thinking about things, and I owe you an apology. I was wrong, and I wanted to make things right. Can we meet up? I stared at the message for a long time. There was that word again, wrong. I hadn't heard that from her, or anyone in the family, in years. Maybe, just maybe, this was an opportunity to finally close the door on the past, to let go of the need for their validation once and for all. But then my phone buzzed with another message, this one from my mother. You need to stop being so stubborn. Karen wants to make amends. Why won't you just forgive and forget? You're making this harder than it needs to be. I sighed, tapping my thumb across the screen. I was tired of this game. I was tired of the unspoken expectations, the constant tug-of-war with people who only saw me through the lens of what I could give them. They hadn't asked how I was doing in a long time. They didn't care about what mattered to me. They only cared about what they could take. But something in me still hesitated. I wasn't heartless. I wasn't immune to the idea of family mending fences, even if it came with a price. I left the messages unanswered, my fingers hovering over the screen. I wasn't going to fight this battle anymore. If Karen was sincere, then she'd show it with actions, not just words. So, I posted again, a photo of me holding up my new certification, smiling a little wider this time. Not bad for a grease monkey, I captioned it. I wanted them to see it, really see it, without expecting anything from me in return. Then, just like that, something clicked. I saw a new notification. It was a comment on my photo from Karen, the first one I had seen from her in a long time. I see you, Daniel. I see how far you've come. I'm proud of you. Keep building. It was simple. There were no excuses, no grand explanations. Just acknowledgement. I paused, staring at her words for a moment, trying to figure out how I felt about them. It wasn't what I had expected, but maybe it was enough. I looked down at the business card I'd just gotten printed. Daniel Turner, motorcycle repair specialist. I had worked hard to get to this point. I wasn't their joke anymore. And, in the end, that was all that mattered. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the familiar ache in my chest settle. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, something real, something that wasn't about them, but about me. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I didn't need it. I was enough on my own. The comments kept coming in, but I didn't care anymore. It wasn't their validation I was after. It was my own. The shop was coming together. Eli, my apprentice, had a few more months of training before he'd be ready to take on more responsibility, but I was impressed with how quickly he was picking things up. The space we had started in felt more like a home now. Tools neatly hung on the wall, a few bikes lined up in the corner, and the hum of business steadily growing. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that felt pretty damn good. It was late spring when the word got out that I was hosting a barbecue to celebrate the shop's grand opening. Nothing too fancy, just a simple cookout for clients, neighbors, and a few old friends who had supported me. I wanted to mark the moment in a way that felt genuine, something that wasn't about impressing anyone, but about making something real. And in this neighborhood, where everyone knew everyone's business, it felt like a good chance to bring people together. The grill was already smoking when Eli and I set up outside the shop, arranging folding chairs and a few tables. We set up a small banner that read, Turner's Motorcycle Repair, Grand Opening Barbecue, in bold, cheerful letters. Eli had even brought his own recipe for ribs, which, after tasting them, I was more than happy to let him handle. The crowd started to trickle in by late afternoon. Old customers, curious neighbors, even a few fellow mechanics who had heard about the shop. It was low-key, relaxed, but that was the charm of it. The food was good, the beer cold, and the conversations flowed easily. Eli cracked a few jokes while flipping burgers, and I caught up with clients who had dropped off bikes for repairs in the past few weeks. It felt like I was finally part of something, like I had built my own space in the world. Then I saw her. Across the street, Karen stood on her front porch, her arms crossed, eyes glued to the scene unfolding in my parking lot. I had noticed her a few times, watching from her window as I set things up, but this was the first time she actually stepped outside. I was almost certain she was waiting for me to acknowledge her, to invite her over, maybe even apologize for the tension between us. But I didn't. Eli noticed her too. He gave me a look, one that was a mix of confusion and amusement, as if he couldn't quite figure out why she was standing there with such a stern expression on her face. Don't worry about it, I told him, tossing a hot dog onto the grill. Let her watch. This is my time. And it was. I had spent years under the weight of my family's expectations, of trying to please people who didn't value what I did or who I was. But now I had something that was mine, something I could be proud of. I wasn't going to let her or anyone else ruin that moment. The barbecue rolled on. More neighbors stopped by, a few clients dropped off their bikes for scheduled maintenance, and Eli and I made sure the drinks didn't run dry. But Karen never came over. She didn't walk across the street, didn't offer any polite words of congratulations, didn't even wave. She just stood there, silent, watching. For a moment, I considered calling her over. Maybe offering an olive branch, a simple "hey, it's good to see you." But I quickly realized something. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. I didn't need her approval to feel validated. It felt strange, honestly. I'd spent so long trying to fit into their world, trying to make them understand me, to make them see me for who I was. But at that moment, I realized that none of that mattered. What mattered was the people standing right here with me, the ones who respected what I was doing and appreciated it for what it was. Around 6 p.m., the sun started dipping below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the shop. The conversation died down a little, but the laughter and the easy atmosphere remained. The last few customers were finishing up their plates, and Eli was already making plans for the next cookout. He was already convinced this would become a regular thing. I caught another glimpse of Karen. She was still on her porch, still watching. But now, there was something different in her posture, something that made it clear she was no longer waiting for me to acknowledge her. Instead, she was leaving, stepping back inside her house, the door shutting quietly behind her. And just like that, she was gone. I didn't feel anger or disappointment. I just felt a sense of finality. For the first time, I realized that I didn't need her in my life to be happy. I didn't need her to understand what I was doing or to validate my choices. I had built this with my hands, my sweat, and my determination, and that was more than enough. As the last of the guests trickled out, Eli clapped me on the back. "You did good, Dan. This place is something special." I smiled, feeling a deep satisfaction that had little to do with the success of the barbecue and everything to do with the fact that I was finally building something of my own, something real. As we cleaned up the tables and the chairs, I glanced across the street one last time. Karen's porch was empty, and I didn't feel any resentment. I was just ready to keep building. Months had passed since the barbecue, and business at the shop was booming. I had hired Eli as a full-time technician. He was quick, reliable, and, most importantly, passionate about the work. I even brought on another tech, a quiet guy named Sam who had just moved to town. The shop was starting to feel like a real business now, not just a mechanic's garage, but a place where people trusted me to take care of their bikes. It felt like I was finally putting all the years of hard work to good use. And then, out of nowhere, I got a letter in the mail. It was from the local community board. The letterhead was formal, the kind of letter you get when someone's trying to make you feel important, even if they're just sending a standard notification. But when I read the first line, my heart skipped a beat. "We are pleased to inform you that you've been nominated for the Annual Service Excellence Award for your contributions to the local business community." I sat there for a moment, the paper in my hands, letting the words sink in. This wasn't just a recognition for fixing bikes. This was an acknowledgement of everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed. The late nights, the constant hustle, the moments when I had to ignore the ridicule from my family. I hadn't expected this. Honestly, I didn't think anyone in the community even knew my name. But here it was, in black and white, a recognition of something I had done by myself, without the approval of anyone who had ever doubted me. The next day, as I was hanging up a new customer's bike, I felt a vibration in my pocket. I pulled my phone out to see a message from Eli. "Dude, you got nominated for the Local Service Excellence Award. That's huge. You should be proud. We all know who really keeps this place running." I smiled. The words felt good, genuine, and for the first time, I realized I was being seen for who I was, not who I was supposed to be. But the recognition didn't come without its usual side effects. I knew my family would hear about it. It was inevitable. The town was small, and word spread fast. It wasn't long before my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from my mother. "Sweetheart, I saw the news. We should talk sometime. There's so much we need to catch up on." It wasn't the first time she'd reached out. After the meme incident, there had been the usual attempts at reconnection, texts here and there, polite inquiries about the shop, but nothing substantial. Nothing that made me believe they'd truly changed. I debated for a while about whether or not to reply. Part of me wanted to just ignore it, to let the walls stay up, to protect myself from whatever guilt trip they were about to put me through. But another part of me, the part that still remembered what it was like to want their approval, found the words on my screen before I could stop them. "I'm doing well, Mom. I'm not sure what there is to catch up on." I sat there staring at the message, my finger hovering over the send button. I felt a pang of guilt, a remnant of the old me. The one who wanted to make things right, who wanted to prove that he could be a good son. But then I remembered something. The years of disappointment. The years of feeling invisible. I wasn't that guy anymore. I didn't need to chase their validation. I didn't need to apologize for choosing my path. I hit send. The reply came quickly, almost immediately. "I just think we need to have a conversation about everything that happened. This distance between us isn't healthy, Daniel. You don't need to keep punishing us." I stared at the message, feeling the familiar ache rise in my chest. It was always the same with them. The tone, the guilt, the expectation that I should just fall in line and forget about everything that had gone wrong. I had heard it all before. I didn't reply this time. Instead, I put my phone down and grabbed the next bike to work on. There was no point in dragging this out. They could keep their apologies, their guilt trips, their expectations. I had moved on, and I realized, standing there in the shop, that I didn't need them to understand what I had built. I didn't need them to recognize it. I had found my own path, my own community, and they were the ones who had to figure out how to live with that. Not me. A week later, the award ceremony came. It was held at a small banquet hall, with local businesses and service providers gathered in a room filled with bright lights and polite applause. Eli and Sam both showed up to support me, their enthusiasm a welcome change from the usual isolation I had felt during family gatherings. When my name was called, I stood up, a little nervous but mostly proud. As I walked to the front, the applause felt genuine, the recognition from people who didn't care about what I wore or how much money I made. It was about what I had done for the community, what I had built from the ground up, with my hands and my sweat. The moment I received the award, I didn't feel the rush of validation that I thought I would. Instead, I felt something deeper, something more powerful. I felt complete. This was my life, my success, my accomplishment. And it was mine to hold, without needing anyone else's approval. When I got home that night, there was a message from my mom again. This one was different. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. Maybe it's time for me to accept that you don't need me to approve of your choices. I don't know how to say it, but I'm proud of you. You've done something good with your life. Maybe we can talk when you're ready." I didn't know if I was ready for that conversation, but I knew one thing for sure. I didn't need her, or anyone else, to tell me that I had made the right choice. I already knew. I smiled to myself, holding the award in my hands, and finally felt like I was free. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was building, and that was enough.